Welcome, everyone. My name is Bruce Tamlin. I'm the chaplain at Silver Bay, and thank you for being with us today. I'd like to just thank again the New York State Alliance of YMCAs and that staff. What a great job they've been doing supporting all of our YMCAs across New York State and otherwise that are tuning into this around the Northeast. Thank you for joining us, and I hope where you are well and taking care and working through this pandemic as best you can. I'd also like to thank our staff at Silver Bay, Austin Porth, who does all our video work, and also Steve Tam, our executive director, and all of my colleagues at Silver Bay. We wish you all well. Here at Silver Bay today, it's an absolutely gorgeous day. It's going to be in the 70s. The lake looks beautiful. We are very grateful to bring you this today and hope this is helpful for you. The title of what I'd like to talk about for a few minutes today is 10 Core Concepts to be living a joy-filled life. Let me just reflect on that for a minute. What's the goal of our life? We could answer that in many different ways, but certainly one of the goals maybe of our lives would be that we know a deep inner joy. And when I talk about a deep inner joy, I don't mean sort of a happiness or that's nice too, but I'm talking about a deep inner sense of contentment with who we are in our life, those we love and care about. So this idea of living out of a deep sense of joy in our life, a deep sense of satisfaction, of contentment, is where I'm going today. And I hope what I share this morning is helpful for you. So the truth is, you and me and everyone else, we're always working on something, whether it's a physical thing or emotional thing, a spiritual thing, a relationship thing. All of us, we're all working on something in our life. It's never absolutely perfect all the time. But this idea that we can work on things to bring more joy to our life. And so the goal might be that we, again, know this deep sense of joy within us. And that these 10 concepts that I'd like to introduce and talk about today for a few minutes are towards that goal of creating that deep sense of joy in our life. Now, I'm going to talk about them on continuums. In the first continuum, you can see here I have forgiveness and unforgiveness and a continuum there. What I do want to say before I get into this first one is that please be gentle with yourself around this. There's no judgment around this at all. There's just a sort of a self-acceptance of where we are and then an attempting to work through that. So again, we're all on this in different places. Please, again, no judgment among you or others. The idea is how to enhance our lives and to know, again, that deep sense of inner joy. So the first continuum I want to speak about is forgiveness or unforgiveness. And I think this is an important one when we think about joy in our life. The idea, can we forgive ourselves of past things that we've done? Can we forgive others around us? Or are we holding on to unforgiveness? Are we holding on to things that maybe we did in the past that we just can't let go of? Are we holding grudges against other people that way? So at some point we sort of come down on this continuum somewhere, and hopefully we're moving in this direction of forgiveness, because a deep sense of forgiveness of ourselves and others allows us the freedom to know that deep sense of inner joy. What I suggest sometimes for people is that if there's somebody that you need to forgive, to talk with them about it or write them a letter or a note about it, sort of making it more aware between the two of you of how forgiveness can happen. I have a story to tell you about a bit of forgiveness. There's two monks walking on their daily walk in the woods, and they don't talk. They're just walking and quietly meditating as they walk. And they come to this stream, and standing at the edge of the stream is a woman who is wanting to get across, and she's not able to get across. And so she asks the priest, the monks there, "Would you help me get across the stream?" And they both look at each other, and then one of the monks picks her up and gently carries her across and puts her down on the other side of the stream. And she goes on her way, and the two monks continue walking on their way, again silently. And about 2 hours of silence in the walk, one of the monks says to the monk who picked up the woman, "You know what? We're not supposed to touch women that way. Why did you do that? How could you have done that?" And the monk who actually picked her up said to him, "Well, I wanted to help her get across the stream, and I put her down 2 hours ago. You've been carrying her these last 2 hours as we've been walking." And so the story is about how can we put down and not carry unforgiveness in our lives that way. So I offer this as the first thought. The ability to forgive ourselves and others leads us to joy. The second continuum I'd like to talk about is a deep sense of humility, or are we sort of boastful or even a bit arrogant that way? And so humility comes from the word humus, which means earth, groundedness. And the beauty of humility is that it allows us to feel that deep sense of contentment in who we are. We don't have to be boastful. We don't have to sort of get caught in our ego that way. We just have a clear sense of who we are, and we don't have to pretend that we're more than we are that way. Actually, kind of a boastful, prideful way actually is a sort of hides a deep sense of insecurity. And so humility has a strong sense of security in who we are. And so on this continuum, hopefully again, we're moving in this direction to know a deep sense of humility. So that's the second continuum that would, I think, help us lead to a greater sense of joy in our life. Just before I go to the next one, Confucius said this about humility. Humility is the solid foundation of all virtues. Humility is the solid foundation of all virtues. I like that. I think humility truly opens up the door for a deeper sense of joy in our lives. The third one is, I call it higher self or ego self. Now, this continuum is a little interesting. What do we talk about? When we talk about higher self is about others, is about serving others, is about caring for others. Higher self is thinking about life, that there's something greater than ourselves. It doesn't just end with us that way. That we work towards and with others for a higher good that way. Ego self, we get caught in, it's all about me. It's what I get, it's what I need, it's what I deserve. And this is so much more sort of self-centered that way, and this is so much more other-centered, relational. This is more just one individual, one person caught in ego self that way. And hopefully the movement that we can all go on is a course towards higher self, and be able to feel confident in who we are and comfortable in who we are. We don't have to keep sort of thinking out of our ego that somehow we're deficient or somehow we're not okay. So that's the third continuum. The fourth one is a little deeper for us, and it deals with conscious and unconscious. So what do we mean by this? Conscious thought, am I aware? Am I aware of my impact on others? When we're conscious about our life, we really are more reflective and thoughtful about who we are as people that way. This consciousness goes a long way in terms of building healthy relationships with people. And we can have open conversations. To be unconscious about it, to not be aware, we can be hurtful in terms of relationships. We don't really quite understand our impact on others, or why are others acting a certain way towards us. This has a kind of an insensitivity about it. We're kind of in our own world that way. This has much more of, a greater awareness of who we are, the people that we are, how we relate to one another. This has a stronger sense of emotional intelligence. This is not as emotionally intelligent that way. So again, we want to be moving in this direction to be more conscious that way of who we are, how we behave, and what our impact is on others. this takes an important sense of real self-reflection that way. And to be able to be in a relationship with some dear folks, dear friends, dear people in your life who actually can be honest with you about your impact and be able to say things like my wife once in a while will say to me when I feel like I'm a bit unconscious about something I've said. She'll gently sort of call me on it, and I really appreciate that about her. And she's open for the same thing for me, because we're not always going to get this right. We're going to be unconscious about things, or say something, or do something, or act in a way that was a bit insensitive because we were not aware. We want to grow in our awareness, and again, this leads us to a greater sense of inner joy. The next one I think is really a very interesting one in our culture, being vulnerable or being invulnerable. It has to do, of course, with men and women, but this one, women tend to be more vulnerable with friends and family and more open about that. Men have more trouble with vulnerability. And so I encourage both, of course, men and women, but men especially. I think through being vulnerable, being honest, being open, being sincere, being our real self that way, allows people to get to know who we are and people to get to connect with us that way. This has a bit of persona, wanting to look good or wanting to look strong or wanting to look invincible, and that's not really, I think, the kind of posture that we want to have that brings a deep sense of joy in our life. I'd like to tell you a story about vulnerability. A pastor named John Ortberg, who's at the Menlo Park Presbyterian Church out in California, tells this story and has told it publicly many times on himself. But he was a pastor of a large church. He's an author and a speaker and well thought of, and people are projecting a lot onto him that he's, bigger than life, and he's having trouble with this. And so he wants to be honest about who he is and his own truth. And so he calls up a good friend of his who's a pastor and asks if he can meet with him to talk about his own sense of vulnerability. And so they meet together, and John pours out his vulnerable side, his shadow stuff, the stuff we all have. And he gets done after speaking about it quite a bit, and he looks at his friend and he said, "So what do you think of me now?" And his friend looks him in the eye and says, "John, I've never loved you more." So there's a power in vulnerability that when people get to really know who we are, we really can feel loved more deeply by them that way. So I'm a big proponent on vulnerability. And I want to just say, not to be vulnerable in inappropriate places, but to be vulnerable with people you trust and know and value and love that way. This doesn't lead us to real joy. It's this movement again, this way, that I think brings about a deeper sense of inner joy in our life. So our next one, number 6, is I talk about it as this: are we living from the inside out, or are we living from the outside in? And again, if joy is our goal, here's how I mean this. When we're living from the outside in, we're sort of looking for joy or something out there, outside, to come into us to make us feel whole, or to make us feel joyful, or to make us feel full. And so we're looking for things to entertain us. We're looking from the outside, somebody, some experience, go to Hawaii, that'll make me feel whole. So we're looking for it outside of ourselves. I don't think that's the way we find a deep inner joy. A deep inner joy is living from the inside out, knowing that from inside we have this sense of wholeness and fullness. This can come in our faith. This can come in our capacity to understand who we are as people that way. It takes some self-reflection, but when we're living from the inside out, we carry this joy within us wherever we go. Where we're on vacation, or there are some stories about people that have been imprisoned that just find a deep sense of inner joy, even being in a prison cell. The idea here, again, to come to this movement of living from the inside out brings us to a deeper sense, I think, of wholeness and joy. The other part about this, about living from the inside out, is the idea that there's a self-acceptance here about who we are, and that we really, and this is the next one we're going to look at, but there's an important dimension here of sort of self-acceptance, that we kind of like who we are. And that gets us to the next one that I'd like to look at, this next continuum. And that is, again, self-acceptance sort of versus unaccepting of oneself that way. This self-acceptance, it's an interesting one in our culture. We're always trying to prove that we're worthy. We're always trying to prove that we're good. We're always trying to prove that we're acceptable that way. Well, what I'm encouraging us here is to think that, am I perfect? No. Am I good enough? Yes. Do I want to grow to be better? Of course. But the idea that we kind of accept ourselves where we are, knowing that we're growing and moving and learning and deepening, and our capacity to love and to be loved and enjoying life that way. But there's this basic inner sort of self-acceptance of who we are. I'm not perfect, but I'm good enough. I'm comfortable in my own skin. I know my own value. I have this sense of self-love that way. And that's a kind of a healthy way of being. When we don't accept ourselves fully that way, we kind of, we're not quite good enough, or we're not worthy enough, or we haven't proved that we're worthy enough, or we have to work harder to prove that we're worthy enough. This is where the love of God comes in a beautiful way, because God says how much God absolutely loves us that way. If faith is part of your walk. Beyond faith, there's the opportunity for really good psychology. And good psychology talks about, there's a sense of self-love that's important for us that way. And without sort of this self-acceptance that way, if we're unaccepting of self, it's hard to fully accept others. What we say here is that we can only give what we have ourselves. So if we really want to love somebody else, there needs to be a deep sense of our own self-love to actually have that love to give to somebody else. So this capacity, again, of self-acceptance, this is where we want to be, to know a deep sense of inner joy in our life. The next one I'd like to talk about is generosity versus greed. And generosity, the ability to share what we have, share our resources, share our presence with others, share our love, be able to give of ourselves that way, not only our material wealth that way or material things, but to give out of our emotional side, to give our capacity for care and compassion and love. Greed is this where we hold on tightly, where we get attached to stuff and we kind of hoard stuff and we need more. I need more and I need more and I need more to actually feel whole and to feel worthy that way, to feel okay about myself. So greed, I'm afraid, sort of slows it all down. It gets tight. It gets hard that way, where generosity is so much more flowing and free. We're much more, we feel freedom in our own sort of generosity, that we can give of ourselves and of our resources to others that way. And in this greed one, we find that, boy, enough is never enough. And so we might accumulate some and then, well, that doesn't feel kind of enough because we feel empty from within. And we keep trying to acquire more to feel full. It never works. No matter how much you accumulate, it's never enough. Because generosity comes out of a deep sense of wholeness for ourselves. And so again, we want to be moving in this direction, generosity in our life. And sometimes just know, I feel I'm greedy. I admit that in my own life, there are moments when I feel greedy, and maybe you do too, and that's normal. But the idea is that we want to try to keep moving in this direction of generosity and sharing. I think about this time of pandemic, and many of us people have been furloughed, and so how do we handle our resources carefully that way? And so I'm not saying that's being greedy, but the idea of this capacity that we have to share of our resources and share of ourselves is an important dimension in knowing this inner deep joy in our life. And after generosity, number 9 is gratitude versus entitlement. And I think gratitude is such a powerful understanding of life. It's sort of a thankfulness, a grateful heart. I'm grateful for the small things in my life. Can we be grateful for this day? Can we be grateful for all that has been provided for us? Can we be grateful for this, as I sit down with this cup of soup and a piece of bread at lunch, can I just be grateful for the food that I have? Grateful is sort of a way of life. It's like are we living with a deep sense of gratitude for our life? Versus entitlement, where entitlement, I deserve, I'm owed this is mine, I'm demanding of this. And it always needs more. We're never fully grateful because we're entitled and we want more and we want more and we want more. And so in entitlement, we kind of get, I'm afraid, somewhat self-centered, and we're not living with a grateful heart. We're not living with an open spirit that way. So I think gratitude is such a beautiful concept for us to be living with, to lead us to a joyful life. And the last one I want to talk about on this continuum is love and fear. It's a little different, but and they're not clearly not opposites that way, but we can move back and forth between these two places, especially during this pandemic. Boy, we're fearful, and what's going to happen, and how about my work and my life and my family, and are we going to be okay? And it's normal to be in that fear place. But just know that love always can overcome fear. Love has this power, and if we know, again, love within ourselves, the love of God, the love of family, the love of those around us, we can overcome fear that way. And of course, we always want to be moving in this direction of having more love in our life. The capacity to love brings a deep sense of inner joy for us in our life. So forgiveness, humility, higher self, consciousness, vulnerability, living from the inside out, self-acceptance, self-love, gratitude, generosity, and a deep sense of love. I think these 10 sort of characteristics, these 10 continuums, help us to lead a life that does have a deep sense of inner joy. And let me just close with a couple of thoughts about how to grow into these. I think there's an element of self-honesty that's important. Self-honesty about where I am on these continuums. Am I too much in fear? Do I have too much greed? Am I not conscious enough? Am I not generous enough? So a self-honesty, and to allow ourselves to feel a little bit uncomfortable about where we might be, to kind of do a self-inventory and understand, where do I want to tweak this a bit? How do I want to grow to be a more joyful person that way? So it takes a self-honesty, a courage to look inside and identify how we want to grow. The second thought is that I think it's with somebody you're close to in your life, maybe a spouse or a brother or a dear friend, or somebody that you turn to sort of for some professional help if you need that, to be able to talk out these things and be able to have a conversation with somebody about, I'm just feeling a little like I'm too self-centered. I don't think about others enough, or whatever it might be in your life. I know some areas in my life that I am certainly working on in terms of these continuums to try to know more joy in my own life. But I think the second idea is to talk to people. And the third is just to know this, that we as human beings, each one of us, we are loved and valued and prized and cherished more than we would ever know. And so in that grounded place, this this place that human beings come to really know this love that God has for us, to know this love that others have for us, to live into that love allows us to feel that deep sense of inner joy that I think brings life so much value, and the opportunity that we can live this life even in the midst of a pandemic. I know there's challenges all around us that way, but to know moments of a deep sense of inner joy, I think is important for all of us. So thank you for taking the opportunity to watch this today. I hope it's helpful for you, and from all of us at Silver Bay, we wish you well, and thank you for being with us. Take care.